Ho, 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 ho. Merry Christmas. Today we're going to get started with Matthew chapter 27. I hope you all are having a merry holiday season. I know I sure am. Getting ready, getting prepared to bring all the presents, all the goodies to all of the children all over the world. But I have a question for you. Have you been naughty? Or have you been nice? Santa knows. That's right. All right, well, let's get started. My nice friends. When daybreak came, all the chief priests and the elders of the people plotted against Jesus to put him to death. After tying him up, they led him away and handed him over to Pilate the governor. Oh, here come my friends. Come on in, everyone. Here come the elves and the reindeer. They're joining us for our reading. Gather round. Yes, gather round. It's snowing. All right, here we go. Listen up, everyone. And then Judas, his betrayer, seeing that Jesus had been condemned, was full of remorse and returned the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and the elders. I've sinned by betraying innocent blood, he said. What's that to us, they said. See to it yourself. So he threw the silver into the temple and departed. And then he went and hung himself. What a sad, sad ending to Judas's life. It didn't have to be this way. Oh, what a sad ending. The chief priests took the silver and said, it's not permitted to put it into the temple treasury since it's blood money. They conferred together and bought the potter's field with it as a burial place for foreigners. Therefore, that field has been called the blood field to this day. Then what was spoken through the prophet Jeremiah was fulfilled. Jeremiah was a prophet who lived many years before Jesus came. But Jeremiah, God had prophesied through the prophet that would take place. And it did on this day. Let's see here. I think it's from Jeremiah 32. And it says, they took 30 pieces of silver, the price of him whose price was set by the Israelites, and they gave them for the potter's field, as the Lord directed me. So look at that. Hundreds of years before Jesus came, it says right there that the Jews were going to look on him, their Messiah, obviously not recognizing he was their Messiah, and they would determine that there was a price, a value, and that his life would only be worth a certain amount. As we know here, 30 pieces of silver. I don't know about you, but the Lord is priceless. There is no price that can be put on him. It is priceless. Let's continue on, friends. Verse 11, now Jesus stood before the governor. Are you the king of the Jews? The governor asked him. And Jesus answered, well, you say so. And while he was being accused by the chief priests and the elders, he didn't answer. And then Pilate said to him, don't you hear how much they're testifying against you? But he didn't answer him on even one charge, so that the governor was quite amazed. And at the festival, the governor's custom was to release to the crowd a prisoner that they wanted. At that time, they had a notorious prisoner called Barabbas. So when they had gathered together, Pilate said to them, who is it you want me to release to you? Barabbas or Jesus, who is called the Christ? For he knew it was because of envy that they had handed him over. It was because of envy. The Jews handed over their Messiah. Not all Jews, the religious Jews. The Jews who were in pride. The Jews that Satan was using. Their hearts had been hardened through unbelief. May that not be said of us, friends. While he was sitting on the judge's bench, his wife sent word to him, "Have nothing to do with that righteous man. For today I've suffered terribly in a dream because of him." There you go again, folks. Pay attention to your dreams. Ho, 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 ho. The chief priests and the elders, however, persuaded the crowds to ask for Barabbas and to execute Jesus. The governor asked them, "Which of the two do you want me to release to you?" Remember, this is a custom. Listen to how the Jews answered. "Barabbas!" they answered. Pilate asked them in verse 22, "What should I do then with Jesus, who is called the Christ?" They all answered, "Crucify him." And then he said, "Why? What has he done wrong?" But they kept shouting all the more, friends, "Crucify him." And when Pilate saw that he was getting nowhere, but that a riot was starting instead, he took some water, washed his hands in front of the crowd, and said, "I'm innocent of this man's blood. See to it yourselves." And all the people answered, "His blood be on us and our children." And then he released Barabbas to them, and after having Jesus flogged, handed him over to be crucified. The Jews condemned themselves right there in that one statement in verse 25. They said, "We say, yes, put his blood, the guilt for this act. Yes, we will admit that his blood is on us and our children." They had no idea they were condemning themselves in that moment. Verse 27. Then the governor's soldiers took Jesus into the governor's residence and gathered the whole company around him. They stripped him, dressed him in a scarlet robe, sounds like the one I wear. Other versions say a purple. Purple is the color of royalty. They also put together a crown of thorns and beat it into his head. They placed a staff in his right hand, and they knelt down before him like they were worshiping him and serving him as a king, and they mocked him. "Hail, King of the Jews!" Then they spit on him, took the staff, and kept hitting him on the head, beating that crown of thorns deeper and deeper into his head. After they had mocked him, they stripped him of the robe, put his own clothes on him, and led him away to crucify him. As they were going out, they found a Cyrenian man named Simon, and they forced him to carry his cross. And when they came to a place called Golgotha, which means the place of the skull, they gave him wine mixed with gall to drink. But when he tasted it, he refused to drink it. That was also prophesied, that he would be given wine to drink. And after crucifying him, they divided his clothes by casting lots, which was also prophesied, another prophecy being fulfilled. Then they sat down and were guarding him. And above his head, they put the charge against him in writing, And they wrote, "This is Jesus, King of the Jews." Then the two criminals were crucified with him, one on the right and one on the left. And it was prophesied that he would die the death of a criminal. He would be put together with criminals. And listen to this in verse 39. Those who passed by were yelling insults at him, shaking their heads and saying, "You who said he would destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days, save yourself. If you really are the Son of God, come down from the cross." In the same way, the chief priests with the scribes and the elders mocked him and said, "He saved others, but he cannot save himself. He is the King of Israel. Look at him. Let him come down now from the cross, and then we'll believe in him. He trusts in God. Let God rescue him now. If he takes pleasure in him, let him rescue him. For he said, 'I am the Son of God.'" And in the same way, even the criminals who were crucified with him mocked and taunted him. From noon until 3 in the afternoon, darkness came over the whole land. About 3 in the afternoon, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, "Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani." That is, my God, why abandoned me?" I just want to see in this moment, I just want to point out in this moment, this was the moment that truly the sins of the whole world were on Jesus. Because it says that because God is a holy God, no sin can dwell in his presence. And in this moment, this is the proof that all of the sin of humanity for the whole world was being put on Jesus. And in this moment, he truly was being separated from God for a moment because of the sin. This is the proof he took your sin. There's nothing that keeps you from him now. If you are in him, no sin keeps you from him. He's already paid the price for your sin. But you better believe your enemy will destroy you with it if you don't repent. Verse 47. When some of those standing there heard this, they said, "Oh, he's calling for Elijah." And immediately one of them ran and got a sponge, filled it with sour wine, and put it on a stick, and offered him a drink. But the rest said, "Oh, let's see if Elijah comes to save him." Verse 50, but Jesus cried out again with a loud voice and gave up his spirit. And suddenly, the curtain of the sanctuary was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth quaked and the rocks were split. Tombs were also opened, and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised. They came out of their tombs after his resurrection and entered into the holy city and they appeared to many. Let's just pause. You may not understand this or know this, but in the temple, for the Jews' temple, there were levels. The place of God, the presence of God dwelled in the most holy place, which was the most inner part of the temple. And so you would enter in from the outside into a court, and then there was the holy place. There was like an outer court, an inner court, and then the Holy of Holies, which is where the presence of God dwelled. But there was this thick curtain that separated the Holy of Holies from that court that was outside of it. Only the priest could enter into the Holy of Holies. Only the high priest, there were many priests, but there was one high priest, and only the high priest could enter into that place, the Holy of Holies, where the presence of God was, and he could only enter in one time a year. Before he could enter in, he had to shed the blood of animals to atone for his sins, and then many animals were sacrificed, their blood shed for the atonement of the rest of the people's sins, and he would take that blood into the Holy of Holies and sprinkle it on the mercy seat so that the sins of Israel could be atoned for once a year. This could only happen once a year, and only the high priest could go in. And not only this, again, no sin can come into the presence of God. So before the high priest would go in, they would tie a rope around his ankle, because it was not uncommon for the high priest to drop dead once he entered in, because he hadn't fully atoned for the sins. And if he wasn't fully cleansed, when he went in, he would drop dead, because no sin can dwell in the presence of God. And that priest would immediately be struck dead. And they would have to pull him out by the rope, because they can't enter in or they'd be struck dead. But listen, I want you to see this right here. This was a thick, thick curtain that covered the holy place, the Holy of Holies. And look what happened when Jesus gave up his spirit. Verse 51, suddenly the curtain was torn in two from the top to the bottom. This was very tall. This curtain was very tall. It ripped from the top to the bottom, showing you no man tore this curtain. This veil was torn by God. The curtain that separated him from the people because of sin was torn in two, meaning it was opened. The curtain was removed, the veil was removed, so that anyone could enter in to the presence of God. Because of what Jesus has done, we no longer have to go through a priest. We no longer have to shed blood to atone for our sins. We don't have to get down and confess and do all these things to come into his presence. The veil has been torn. God himself, Jesus, tore it. He shed his own blood. He went into the heavenlies, into the place of the heavens, and he shed his own blood. He took is what the book of Hebrews says. This is further in the book of Hebrews, but he took his own blood into the Holy of Holies in the heavens, because the physical temple was a shadow of the heavenly temple. Jesus took his own blood into the heavenly temple, into the Holy of Holies, sprinkled his own blood on the mercy seat to atone for the sins of all. And because of that, we all now can come boldly to the throne of grace and receive mercy in our time of need. We need a revelation of what Jesus has truly done for us. Wow. Verse 54. And when the centurion and those with him who were keeping watch over Jesus saw the earthquake and the things that had happened, they were terrified and said, truly, this man was the Son of God. Many women who had followed Jesus from Galilee and looked after him were there, watching from a distance. Among them were Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of Zebedee's sons. And when it was evening, a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph came, who himself had also become a disciple of Jesus. And I just want to point out, this man was a Pharisee. And remember, it was the Pharisees really that crucified him, the religious Jews. But this man, this Pharisee, see, there's hope for all. This man, he recognized that this was the Messiah. And he ended up becoming a disciple. Anyway, and it says, he approached Pilate and asked for Jesus' body, and Pilate ordered for it to be released. So Joseph took the body, wrapped it in clean, fine linen, and placed it in his new tomb, which he had cut into the rock. This was also a prophecy being fulfilled, that he would be laid in an unused tomb. He left after rolling a great stone against the entrance to the tomb. Mary Magdalene and the other Mary were seated there facing the tomb. The next day, which followed the preparation day, the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered before Pilate and said, "Sir, we remember that listen what they call him, that while this deceiver was alive, still, he said, 'After 3 days I will rise again.'" Look at that. They call him this deceiver. This was one of their own. Jesus was a Jew. He was a Hebrew. His own, it says that he came to his own. There's a verse in the Bible that says he came to his own and his own didn't recognize him. So here they're saying now, look, he claimed that he was going to rise again in 3 days. So give orders that the tomb be made secure until the 3rd day. Otherwise, his disciples may come, steal him, and tell the people that he has been raised from the dead. And this last deception will be worse than the first. "You have a guard of soldiers," Pilate told them. "Go make it as secure as you know how." So they went, secured the tomb by setting a seal on the stone and placing a guard. Well, that's all for today, folks. Ho, 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 ho. Merry Christmas. That was a heavy one today. I've read that many, many times, and it still gets me every time. I can't thank Jesus enough. I just love him so much. Oh, what he went through for us. I hope you can see the value, that there is no value that can be placed on him. But that's all for today, folks. Matthew 28 next time.